When I received the call that Zephyr had been in a car accident, I had just received the divorce agreement he had mailed to me. I suddenly laughed. Fortunately, I hadn't signed it yet. Fortunately, hadn't fulfilled. We hadn't gotten a divorce yet. Fortunately, having fulfilled psi. I still have so many things I can decide. When I rushed to the hospital, I saw that he was unconscious but still holding his mistress tightly. I heard that during the car accident, he protected Coral in the passenger seat right away. The medical staff in the hospital were all touched. It was only when I arrived that they realized that the two people who had seemed so touching just now were actually an adulterous man and woman worthy of being despised. Because the two of them were holding each other so tightly, the treatment was greatly hindered. Looking at Coral's elderly parents, who were crying and begging the doctor to treat them. But they couldn't make a decision. Amputate both of his arms. I made the decision without hesitation. Sierra, your husband Zephyr was seriously injured in a car accident and is currently being rescued at the first hospital. Please come over immediately. When I received the phone notification, I was still holding the divorce agreement that Zephyr had mailed to me. He had already signed it. Yesterday, he suddenly called me after not having contacted me for a month. Sierra, let's get a divorce. I was just taken aback for a moment. After all, I had also heard the rumors recently that he had been high profile, like going in and out with Coral. Her parents are pressing hard. The girl was young when she was with me. I was her first. And now she's pregnant. I have to take responsibility for her. I'm going to meet her parents with her tomorrow. Yes, having fulfilled my psi. I had a boyfriend before I was with him. When we were starting our business, I had always been in poor health. And we still don't have a child until now. After we slept together for the first time, when he found out that I wasn't a virgin, he hugged me and once said, "There will only be me in the future. And you can only have me." What nonsense about the virgin complex. The King dynasty has been gone for so many years. How could I have just realized that he still had such an idea? We'll divide all the property equally. And the company shares you want will also be divided equally. I've sent you the divorce agreement. Sign it. When I come back, we'll go and get the divorce certificate. I didn't interrupt him and listened to him arranging everything by himself. Sierra, do you have any other thoughts? You've already arranged everything and then you come to ask for my thoughts. I have so many thoughts. I want to give you both a good slap in the face. Have you forgotten that your current company was founded by me and you together? The person who committed adultery still wants half of it. Dream on. I'm not a virtuous person by nature. I returned to the family for love and my health. I became a strong woman in the workplace again when I returned to my career a year ago. After all this time of making a fuss, you want to end it with just half of the property and then live your happy life. Are you too naive or am I too kind and easy to be bullied? We'll negotiate the content of the divorce agreement again. We'll communicate face to face when you come back. You agree? Zephyr's voice was a bit distorted. He really must be crazy. When you come back after meeting her parents, we'll discuss the divorce with a lawyer. I wish you all the best when meeting her parents. After saying that, I hung up the phone, ignoring Zephyr's gloomy and unpleasant face on the other end. After hanging up the phone, I shredded the divorce agreement and called my lawyer to prepare to draw up a new divorce agreement. For adultery, it's already merciful of me not to make you leave the house penniless. But now, he, who was preparing for a divorce, was in emergency treatment in the hospital, and I had become the person who could decide everything about him. The world was a bit fantastical. When I rushed to the hospital, the medical staff were very anxious. It turned out that when the large truck crashed head-on, Zephyr immediately hugged Coral in the passenger seat, and Coral also hugged him back. The way the two of them held each other tightly was very touching, making people sigh at the greatness of love. However, now no matter how the doctor tried, they couldn't pull Zephyr's arms apart, and it was very difficult to carry out the rescue work for both of them. And I was the only one who could make the decision. After all, I was Zephyr's legal wife and the only guardian. Coral's parents grabbed the doctor's hand and begged desperately for them to pull the two apart quickly and save their daughter. The only way now is to amputate the man's arms. Otherwise, there's no way to separate them. Then amputate them. Hurry up and save my daughter. Coral's mother shouted, making the already noisy emergency room even more boisterous. We must have the guardian's signature before we can perform the surgery. The nurse could only patiently explain. He has no parents. We are the parents of his girlfriend. We can make the decision. Doctor. Please save my daughter quickly. He loves my daughter so much that he definitely won't hold it against us. Poor parents all over the world. It's no wonder they only had their daughter in mind. In the current situation, even if we carry out the rescue, the probability of both of them surviving is not high. Please be prepared. Family members. The doctor who came out said seriously. Hearing this, I stepped forward quickly. I couldn't let them die together. Doctor. I'm Zephyr's wife. Please amputate Zephyr's arms and do your best to rescue him. Upon hearing my words, the noisy voices fell eerily silent for a few seconds. Are you sure? Sure. I'll sign right away. The doctor looked at me. I didn't know what it meant. Maybe he was thinking that since it was said that they couldn't be saved, why was I still trying to save this scumbag? Was I out of my mind? Coral's parents looked at me. There was no trace of guilt on their faces. And they gave me a hateful glare. Well, what kind of parents raise what kind of daughter? What kind of good people could the parents be who knew that their daughter was a mistress but still forced them to meet the parents? But I didn't care. You see, only I can decide whether to save Zephyr or not. In the future, there will be a lot more things to discuss them. With my signature, the emergency treatment started quickly. I thought the surgery wouldn't end for a while, so I prepared to find a place to solve my dinner first. Hello, nurse. I'm going out for a while. Call me if there's anything. So, while the nurse was stunned, I turned around and left. I guess she must have encountered a situation where the family member of a patient being rescued was not in a hurry and went out for the first time. However, I think she will understand. After all, my husband had a car accident with his mistress. And it was already merciful of me, as the legitimate wife, having fulfilled wives, to sign to save him. I found a restaurant near the hospital and ordered my favorite tomato pasta. I ate it in big mouthfuls. The tomato sauce was a bit astringent, and it made me shed tears. This tomato pasta wasn't as delicious as the one Zephyr made. I thought that nothing about him would make me cry again. A year ago, when I just found out that he had cheated, I made a scene, cried, and went crazy. In the end, when I got his disgusted look and that sentence, "Look at the way you are now. How can I love you again?" I secretly made up my mind that I wouldn't shed a single tear for him again. But now, I still laughed and then cried. Well, after all, we had known each other for 7 years. And together for 6 years. And deeply loved each other. We had been poor together. Worked hard together. Cried and laughed together. When I was a senior in college, I was intern at a media company and met Zephyr, who was also a newbie. Following the arrangement of my senior, I went to print the materials needed for the meeting. The old printer seemed to be against me and wouldn't work properly. I was so angry that I hit the printer twice. The noise alerted him next to me. The printer is a bit old. It requires some skills. Let me help you. He smiled and reached out to help. His handsome face shone into my heart like the sun, making me freeze in place. As his well-defined fingers fiddled with the printer and it made a sound, I came back to my senses. It's okay now. When you use it next time, just pay attention to this position. As he said that, he demonstrated it to me again. Later, I learned his name and gradually got to know him. After that, we were on the same project, worked overtime together, and grew from newbie workers to being able to take on responsibilities independently. At that time, we would quarrel about the project and then quickly high-five to celebrate when we solved a difficult problem. After the celebration banquet for the perfect end of the first project we were jointly in charge of, we secretly celebrated again. I still remember that he said, "Sierra, I love you. Let's date. Your efforts and doctor have convinced me. Everything about you makes me addicted. I will take good care of you." At that time, his eyes were filled with me. And his eyes were shining brightly. The moment I agreed, we hugged each other tightly, as if we had the whole world. I wiped away my tears and walked out of the restaurant. The black night enveloped everything. I tightened my thin shirt and walked slowly towards the hospital. It's so amazing. The last time he was in the hospital, it was because of a serious stomach problem. At that time, we were still okay. I would make soup for him, comfort him, and take care of him. He would feel sorry for my hand that was burned red from making soup and would smile and say to me, "Don't worry. It will get better with some rest. This time we've won this big project. And we can buy that villa you've taken a fancy to. Isn't your husband great?" But now, he was holding the person he had cheated with tightly and was walking towards death himself. How ironic. I thought we could grow old together. But in the end, we were defeated by a sudden change in our relationship. Sitting on the chair outside the operating room, looking at the anxious old couple opposite, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. The first time I heard Coral's name was less than a month after I left the company. More than 2 years ago. Due to the hard work at the beginning of our business startup, my health showed warning signs. Zephyr and I also planned to start having a child. So, on the doctor's advice, I started to stop working and take care of my health. At that time, I hadn't left the company's big group chat yet. I heard that a new girl had come to the administrative department. She had just arrived, made mistakes several times, and was scolded by the supervisor. The girl was innocent and didn't understand the workplace. When she first came, she didn't know how to argue. She would just cry silently when she was scolded and work overtime to study. I was thinking at that time that she was a plucky little girl. However, in the workplace, no one has the obligation to teach you. Everyone has to go through it on their own. So, I didn't pay much attention to it. Later, I heard about her again from Zephyr's mouth. That day, we had an appointment to have dinner together and went to the private restaurant that I had reserved for a long time. Zephyr across from me was looking down and replying to the message on his phone. And he was a bit perfunctory to my questions. "Whose message has you so fascinated?" Hearing the anger in my words, he looked up and smiled gently, saying, "It's something about the company. No one fascinates me as much as you do." As he said that, he handed me his phone to look at. "My secretary. She's confirming my itinerary for tomorrow with me. The girl has just been transferred to this position and is a bit unfamiliar. But she's still serious and careful." I looked at the phone interface. The chat box was indeed all about work matters. "I remember this girl hasn't been here for long. When did she become your secretary?" Hearing that I knew about this girl, Zephyr across from me was surprised for a moment. But there was nothing abnormal. "Yes, honey, fulfilled my obsession. Coral has been here for about 4 months. She was in the administrative department before. I saw that she was serious and down to earth at work. Since Tang Wei was going to be transferred to the business department, I transferred her here. She's still learning and handing over the work with Tang Wei." "What? Are you jealous that I have a female secretary?" As he spoke, he even winked at me, looking playful. At that time, I just smiled and said confidently, "I'm so good. You'd have to be blind to cheat on me." Zephyr laughed and ruffled my hair. "Whose girl is this? So confident? Let me take a look. Oh, it turns out she's mine." After saying that, he held my face in both hands, observed it seriously for a few seconds, then nodded and said, "Indeed. You have the capital to be confident. My wife is so beautiful and charming. I'd have to be blind to cheat on her." Then, let out a low sigh. He lowered his head and kissed me gently. Later, I don't know when he went blind. Gradually, he seemed to felt my obsession. He stopped reporting his itinerary to me, and the number of times we had dinner alone became fewer and fewer. My former colleagues in the company, when chatting occasionally, would secretly tell me, "Sister Sierra, you know Secretary of President Zephyr, right? That young girl has become a bit assertive recently, as if she has someone backing her up. She used to look harmless, but recently she has a bit of a temper." Everything was hinting and clearly indicating the direction of something I didn't want to believe. On the second day after Zephyr stood me up again and came home late, without telling him, I suddenly showed up in his office. I looked at the young girl in front of the desk. She was wearing a well-fitted professional suit. Although her figure was average, The custom-made suit made her look less gaunt. She also had a delicate makeup on. No longer the plain look when I first met her. A necklace and earrings around her neck and ears were all new styles from Brand D. And each piece didn't quite match her secretary's salary. Perhaps my sudden appearance made her a bit flustered. "Sister Sierra. You're here. President Zephyr is in a meeting." She was stunned for a while before finding her voice. "You'd better call me Mrs. Zephyr. After all, you're Zephyr's secretary. I'll just go to his office." I smiled and looked at her. Her face turned pale for a moment. She tried to smile and nodded. "Okay, Mrs. Zephyr." I suddenly felt a bit pitiful for myself. I had never called myself Mrs. Zephyr in the company before. But now, I could only use this identity to strike at her. I looked around Zephyr's office. The photo of us on the desk was still there. But there was an additional small potted plant, which was well taken care of. I sat on the office chair, not knowing the purpose of my coming here at this moment. I just didn't want our 5-year relationship to end like this. And I didn't want to lose him. Zephyr pushed the door and entered the office. When he saw me, he didn't show surprise. He smiled and walked towards me. Half sat on the desk. And reached out to gently brush aside the stray hair on my forehead. "Why did you come here today?" His usual tenderness didn't seem like that of a cheating husband. "I came because I missed you. We haven't had dinner alone outside for a month. Have you been very busy recently?" I looked at him calmly, showing my longing. "Well, I've been quite busy recently. There have been some problems with the project with Guanhua." As soon as he finished speaking, Coral walked in without knocking. "President Zephyr. Your coffee." I looked at her and suddenly laughed. "Zephyr. Your secretary is not very competent. I've been here for a while. And she didn't even ask me what I wanted to drink." Hearing my words, Coral appropriately showed a trace of panic and bewilderment. As if I was bullying her. "Sister Sierra. No, Mrs. Zephyr. I'm sorry. I was a bit busy just now. What would you like to drink?" "I'll prepare it now." I looked at Zephyr. His eyebrows were slightly furrowed. It seemed that he was not comfortable with my direct statement. But he still broke the awkwardness. "Go and make a cup of rose tea." "No need. I'll leave soon. You can go out now." Watching the young girl go out with a round look on her face, I looked up at Zephyr and said, "Your secretary is not very competent. Her professional etiquette and abilities don't match well. If I remember correctly, she has been your secretary for almost a year, but she still behaves like this. I suggest you change your secretary. She's usually a serious girl. She must be nervous seeing you today. After all, you've always had prestige in the company. Let's not talk about her. What would you like to eat? We can go tonight." He smiled and tried to change the subject. I looked at him and said seriously, "Zephyr. I don't like her. I hope you can fire her and have no more contact with her in the future." My serious tone finally made him feel the gravity of the situation. "Sierra. She's just my secretary. She might have made a mistake today. But it's not enough to get her fired." I said I don't like her and I don't want her to be around you. I didn't want to be too straightforward. I just wanted to cut off their connection. If he could turn back, then I could ignore whatever had happened between them before. "Sierra. Don't be unreasonable. You also started as a novice in the workplace. Dismissing someone without cause. You know it will be a great harm to her." I stubbornly looked straight at him, just wanting to see his choice. The atmosphere froze. Finally, having fulfilled my, Zephyr lowered his head. "Okay. Since you're my wife. But I can't fire her directly. Let's transfer her to the business team downstairs. We won't have any interaction with her in normal times. Okay? Wife. I only have you. You have to trust me. Let's go to that barbecue restaurant you've been talking about today." He pulled me up, buried his head in my neck and shoulder, and coaxed me. But at this moment, my heart felt desolate. His actions at this moment clearly showed that he wouldn't make a choice. At this time, he might prefer me. But he still didn't want to give up Coral. I smiled on the surface and let him hold my hand as we walked out of the office together. Seeing us holding hands and coming out, Coral's eyes turned red in an instant. But she still pretended to be strong. And Zephyr, holding my hand, didn't see Coral's grievance. And Zephyr started coming home on time more often. However, once the seed of distrust is planted, it will take root and sprout. I still hired someone to secretly investigate. The person who was investigating reported Zephyr's itinerary for the past month to me. Indeed, there was no more interaction between the two of them. What was my mood like at that time? I felt relieved and happy. That night, I even carefully arranged a candlelight dinner for the two of us. I put on the daring pajamas he liked. We had a tender night together. The next day, looking at Zephyr holding me, it was as if we had gone back to the time when we just got married. He would hold me when we slept, gently say goodnight and good morning to me, and kiss me before going to work and after coming home from work. I thought everything was developing in a good direction. My body was in poor condition due to excessive fatigue and coldness. And I had been recuperating. We had a plan to have a baby a year ago. Recently, all the indicators in my physical examination were good, and I made an appointment for a pre-pregnancy physical examination. However, on the day of the physical examination, Zephyr, who said he was going back to the company, didn't show up for a long time. He didn't answer his phone or reply to my WeChat messages. Worried, I could only call his newly arrived secretary. And the answer I got made my heart feel like it was in an ice cave. It turned out that he didn't go back to the company but went to the hospital. Yesterday, had himself wild session. Coral accompanied the team leader to a business dinner. The person in charge of the client at the dinner table didn't have a good reputation in the circle. Coral wasn't good at socializing. So she offended that person in charge. She was persuaded and forced to drink a lot of wine and was sent to the hospital in the early morning. When I arrived at the door of Coral's hospital room, only Zephyr was there. He carefully coaxed the person in the hospital bed, held the person with red eyes and a weak look, and said softly, "I won't let you face that situation again. It's all my fault." Coral cried, and tears fell. "No. It's my fault. I shouldn't have liked you. But I really couldn't help it. Brother Zephyr. I really like you. Don't abandon me. I've been really miserable these more than a month. I'll be good. I won't show up in front of Sister Sierra. I won't stand in your way. I just want you to spare some time to accompany me. Don't you like the small wontons I make? I've learned more dishes recently. Please don't leave me. Okay? You don't know that every time I learn to cook, I think of you. I think of the way you look when you're happy eating. And my heart aches as if it's being twisted. But I endured it. But now I really can't endure it anymore." Hearing Coral's broken voice, each word full of a hint of scheming, I was actually so angry that I laughed. That young girl really knew how to play her cards. "Coral, you know I won't get a divorce. Why are you doing this?" Zephyr's voice carried a hint of helplessness and heartache. "Brother Zephyr. I know. That time you were drunk, and I crossed the line again and again. But every time we were together, ask yourself if you were also happy and relaxed. As long as you're happy, I don't care. I'll always be here. Coral, let's take good care of your health first. Okay? I'll take good care of you. Okay. I'll listen to you. Brother Zephyr. As long as you're by my side." The phone's recording was still going on. And the picture was clear. But my eyes became blurred. I thought my marriage had finally come to an end. And the only thing I could do was to protect my property. I saved the recording and turned away. I thought my back should look like a defeated rooster. What should I do now? My mind was in a mess. The only thing I could think of was to make them all have a hard time. But I still didn't know how to face it and was at a loss. I went home like a zombie. The warmth of the past month was like a dream. And finally the dream had woken up. "Sierra. I'm sorry. I've been quite busy at the company. So I'm just replying to your message now. I have to work overtime tonight. It will be too late to go home and I'll disturb you. So I'll stay in the office lounge." Looking at his message full of lies, I could actually reply with a "okay." I spent the whole night completely accepting the fact that my marriage couldn't continue. Even if Zephyr said he wouldn't get a divorce under such an affectionate confession, I didn't want him anymore. My eyes were so swollen from crying all night that they were almost unrecognizable. The person in the mirror was so haggard that even my parents might not recognize me. The phone screen was still showing the message Zephyr had just sent me. Sierra. I'm sorry. There are problems with the project. And I have to go on an urgent business trip for a few days. He should be taking care of Coral. His excuse is so perfunctory. Just as well. It gives me time to digest everything and make plans. I pulled myself together. Trying my best to stay sober. Analyze rationally. And list the things I needed to do. For now, I need to act calmly and cooperate with his performance. At least, before I gain control of the company, I should pretend not to know as much as possible. I have been away from the company for over a year. And Zephyr is in charge of all the key projects. I arranged for people to investigate Zephyr and collected evidence of his infidelity. I communicated with a lawyer who has a good relationship with me about potential consequences, and analyzed how to maximize my interests. And I started preparing to return to the company. Zephyr came home 3 days later and brought me a gift. Looking at the necklace in my hand, I guessed that he really wanted to take the easy way out. He gave Coral a necklace from Brandy to appease her. And he gave me the same kind. Even the styles were very similar. Wife. I've been so busy these days that I've neglected you. Facing his hypocritical tenderness, I could actually play along. Honey. You've worked hard on your business trip. Go take a shower and have a good rest at home. Watching him walk towards the bathroom. And thinking of the photos someone sent me of him taking care of Coral. The pictures of them hugging and holding hands. A wave of disgust washed over me. Honey. I've been taking good care of my health recently. Seeing how busy you are, I also want to help you. I think I should go back to the company and share some of your workload. My words made Zephyr, who was drying his hair, stop in his tracks. He put down the towel in his hand, walked towards me, and his face was full of disapproval. Sierra, your health hasn't been very good. I still want you to take good care of yourself. Besides, didn't we plan to have a baby? I can handle the company. You'd better rest first. Your husband can support you and take good care of you. He hugged me and tried to soothe me. Unfortunately, I had already made up my mind. I know. But I really want to go back to the company. I've thought about it a lot. I still like the days when I was working. I promise I'll take good care of myself first. Also, having fulfilled my obsession, I won't go to the business department. I'll start in the logistics department. At least I'll have something to do and won't be too idle. Okay? He looked at me seriously and finally compromised. Maybe it was because I wasn't going to the core business department, or maybe he thought that if I was busy, I wouldn't bother him and Coral. Anyway, having fulfilled my obsession, I achieved my goal of returning to the company. When I returned to the company as the deputy director of administration, Coral had already left her job. Zephyr had settled her in a high-end residential area and introduced her to a friend's company, where she was doing a dispensable job. She had been relatively well behaved these days, and Zephyr would occasionally go there for a picnic. I tried hard to win over the company's talents without being obvious, increasing my bargaining chips. At the same time, I also played the role of a qualified virtuous wife. Probably because of my inaction, Coral became anxious and added me on WeChat. I looked at her Moments post from yesterday, which showed a sumptuous dinner and a photo of only a man's hand on the opposite side, with the caption "To people and 3 meals a day are the happiest." I think this Moments post was specifically for me to see, and it's even possible that it was only visible to me. After all, that hand was still wearing our wedding ring. I smiled, took a screenshot of the Moments post, and ignored her little tricks. After all, I don't want the man anymore. But I definitely want the money. After being ignored several times for her demonstrations on Moments, she finally sent me a message. The words on the interface were humble and full of a tea flavor. Sister Sierra, I'm sorry. I really love Brother Zephyr so much. Please forgive me. I really can't live without him. He loves me too. He said he feels comfortable staying with me and wants to be with me all the time if possible. I'm not as pretty as you and not as capable as you. I'm not as good as you in anything. If you leave Brother Zephyr, you can meet someone better. But I can't. I only have him. Please. It's really the case that when you're weak, You think you're in the right. Mistresses are so self-righteous these days. Does Zephyr know that you contacted me? If he wants a divorce, he can talk to me directly. I have nothing to say to you. In half a year, I have now entered the core of the company. But there is still not enough room for operation in the core projects. And the bargaining chips to kick Zephyr out of the company are still insufficient. It's not time to break up with him yet. I guess Zephyr still doesn't know that she contacted me. Or at this time, Zephyr still doesn't want a divorce. The number of times he comes home remains the same. And I've been pretending to be deaf and mute during his occasional business trips. It seems that the pressure Coral exerts is not great enough. In the following month, Coral's WeChat messages didn't stop for a single day. From her chat records with Zephyr, their group photos, to the upgraded nude photos she sent these days. I looked at the nude photo she just sent, where she was wearing something sexy, with a flushed face, and snuggled happily against Zephyr, who was sleeping with his upper body bare. From the initial heartache and despair to numbness and indifference, I have finally completely moved on. Even when seeing such a picture, I can just smile and save it calmly. It took me more than half a year to return to the company and play the role of a blind person for half a year. Now it's time to reveal everything. There is sufficient evidence from the lawyer, which is enough for me to successfully get out of this marriage that seems happy on the surface, and is dirty inside with the fruits at victory. In the company, I have already established a firm foothold and have enough capital to confront him. I looked around this home that I had carefully decorated at the beginning. My heart was still bitter. After all, this villa was decorated by us bit by bit together. I once fantasized about growing old here. Now, accompanied by the night, there is only loneliness left. The fantasized happiness has finally become a bubble. Fortunately, having so felt, I can still move on. And I have also prepared myself for a long-term battle. I'll have a good rest tonight. The next day, Zephyr arrived home at the appointed time. Judging from his expression, I guessed that Coral still hadn't told him that I already knew about their infidelity. Wife, didn't we agree to go out for dinner? He took off his suit as usual, sat on the sofa, and looked at me tenderly. I reached out and handed him the document bag, motioning for him to take it. What's this? You look so serious. As he spoke, he opened the document bag, and the photos of him and Coral inside spilled out. There were photos of them hugging, kissing, having fulfilled website, in the car, in the mall, as well as the nude photos and WeChat screenshots that Coral sent to me. Zephyr's face instantly darkened in several shades. He quickly looked at me, threw the photos aside, and tried to grab my hand. Wife, it's not like this. We were just acting on the occasion. Wife, please forgive me. Zephyr, you know my temper. I gave you a chance when I asked you to fire Coral. I also believed what you said that you wouldn't contact her again. Unfortunately, Haditha felt you let me down. I won't trust you anymore. Let's get a divorce. No. I won't get a divorce. I still love you. It's not easy for us to get to where we are now. You also know it's not easy. When we were starting our business, I accompanied you to eat instant noodles, accompanied you to socialize, and worked hard with you. You said you would give me a good life and that everything would be mine. But now, it's only been 6 years. Zephyr, do you know how desperate I was when I saw the photos Coral sent me? Let me go. For the sake of our past relationship, please sign the divorce agreement. As I spoke, I handed him the agreement in another document bag. I won't get a divorce. He looked at me with bloodshot eyes. I don't understand. Why doesn't he want a divorce after having an affair? He didn't even look at the content of the agreement. Zephyr, I really want a divorce. Please take a look at the agreement. Because of your infidelity, the cash and real estate will belong to me. And I want 60 of our joint company shares. As for the money you spent on Coral before, I won't bother with that. Since reasoning emotionally doesn't work, I can only reason rationally. You've been preparing for this for a long time, haven't you? Zephyr stared at me and suddenly laughed. When did you know about this? You started preparing before Coral sent you these things, right? You were guarding against me. Or have you never fully trusted me? I won't get a divorce. I'll deal with Coral. After saying that, Zephyr tore up the divorce agreement, picked up his suit jacket, and went upstairs. Looking at his dejected figure and thinking about what he just said. I'm indeed a cold-hearted and calculating person. Even though I liked him first, I also schemed to make him confess first. Even after getting married, I didn't fully trust him. But I don't think I'm wrong. The facts have proved that you shouldn't trust anyone too much. Coral suddenly appeared in the company, breaking the peaceful afternoon. Looking at her red eyes and embarrassed appearance, I realized that Zephyr, who hadn't shown up all morning, had really gone to deal with Coral. He's going to send me to the United States. Are you satisfied? She looked at me resentfully and said, "What does that have to do with me? I told you a long time ago that I don't want Zephyr anymore. Whether you leave or not won't affect my decision." I looked at her calmly. Zephyr rushed over in a hurry and grabbed Coral. Before he could say anything, I only heard Coral's pleading. "Zephyr, you said you would take responsibility for me? I only have you. I've given you everything. I'll be good and listen to you. Just let me stay by your side. Sierra doesn't love you anymore. She doesn't want you. I love you so much. I gave you my first time. Please take a look at me. Okay?" She hugged Zephyr tightly. And in the quiet office, only her soft sobbing could be heard. "You said you like being with me. That you feel comfortable with me. That you like the food I cook. And that you like my cuteness and tenderness. I love you and will do anything you say. Don't abandon me." She understands Zephyr. She understands him better than I do. At least, I can't be that cute and submissive. Her words finally moved Zephyr. The person who was angry just now looked sad. "Can you find another place to express your feelings for each other? Please stay away from my office. Sign the divorce agreement as soon as possible. Also, heading so silhouette session. Coral, don't appear in front of me again. Otherwise, before the divorce, I'll sue to recover the monies Zephyr spent on you." Maybe my threat worked. At least, Coral didn't make a scene in front of me again. I don't know what trapped Zephyr. Since he left with Coral that time, he didn't contact me for a long time. And next time he contacted me was the phone call before the accident. Now, the person who was preparing for a divorce had an accident and is still being rescued. There's no need to divide the company. And I don't need to carry out my previous plans. Thanks to Zephyr's protection, Coral survived the crisis and was transferred to a regular ward, but she lost the baby in her womb. Her parents made a big scene in the hospital when they heard that there was no baby. After staying in the intensive care unit for 2 days, Zephyr finally didn't wake up. Zephyr's funeral was held in a simple manner. I thought everything would end with his death, but Coral's phone call made me, who had returned to work, have to deal with the mess he left behind. "Sister Sierra. Zephyr left me an agreement. He left me money and shares. Now you have to come and pay my medical expenses for me." Listening to her on the phone, it was really ironic. He actually left me with such a mess. When I arrived at the hospital ward with the lawyer, Coral's parents looked at me with intense hatred. "You and Zephyr have both signed to get a divorce. What Zephyr left should belong to our Coral. And you should give it to us. Don't think that just because he's dead, you can renege on it." Coral let her mother keep chattering while pretending to be weak. "Sister Sierra. I know you're capable. But you can't take the things Zephyr left for me. He signed an agreement, and half of the shares in his name are supposed to be given to me. Coral, you should know that we haven't divorced yet. All the properties under his name are our joint properties. Even if he said or wrote that something was for you, I also have a share in it. Moreover, since he died without a will, the only heir to his property is me. We don't understand anything about property inheritance. I only know that he signed and guaranteed it for us. You have to give it to us. Now we can't even afford to pay the hospital bills. Are you trying to force us to death?" Her mother looked like a rascal. "Coral, has Mr. Zephyr's signed agreement been notarized? What's the content of the agreement? We can negotiate and communicate about it." "We don't understand any of that. Zephyr signed and guaranteed that half of the shares of his current company should be given to our Coral. We're selling it to you. We want the money directly. I heard that the market value is about 10 million yuan. Give us the money." Obviously, Her rascally mother had become her spokesperson. Coral, is this your demand? Yes. Sister Sierra. You know that those shares are worth far more than that. I only want these 10 million yuan. After that, I'll have nothing to do with you anymore. Otherwise, I'll expose it to the media. And that will be even worse for the company. Looking at her as if she had me in her grasp, I suddenly felt like a fool for not having calculated the monies Zephyr had spent on her before. Coral, I didn't originally want to calculate so much with you. I originally thought that after Zephyr passed away, everything would just fade away. I didn't expect you to have such schemes. It seems that I was too generous before. Coral, every penny Zephyr spent on you is half mine. Now I'm telling you that you have to pay back every penny he spent on you before. The lawyer will send you the list and details tomorrow. You're required to pay me back within 10 days. Otherwise, we'll see each other in court. They then realized that the two people who had seemed so deeply touching before were actually an adulterous man and woman worthy of being despised. Let's go. Lawyer Liu. After saying that, I ignored the reactions of the 3 members of Coral's family and walked out of the ward. It was 3 months later that the money was finally transferred to my account. I heard that they had sold their house in their hometown and owed some debts. During that time, Coral had come to the company several times but was chased away by the security guards. Later, there was no more news about them. They were people I didn't want to have anything to do with in the first place. So naturally there was no news after the money arrived, but I imagined they're not having a good life. If she hadn't had such crooked thoughts, she could at least have an ordinary job and ordinary happiness. After taking over the company completely, my days have been busy and fulfilling. And everything is developing in a good direction. I still have the ability to love someone. But I no longer have the courage to trust completely.